On an otherwise ordinary October night in 1948, high above the quiet fields of North Dakota, a decorated World War II pilot found himself chasing something that should not have existed, something that would outfly him, outthink him, and vanish without a trace, leaving behind a question that, more than 70 years later, still refuses to be answered. Lieutenant George F. Gorman was not a man given to imagination. At 25 years old, he was already a seasoned pilot, a combat veteran of the Second World War, and a flight leader with the 178th Fighter Group of the North Dakota Air National Guard. He had logged hundreds of hours in the cockpit and had faced enemy aircraft under real combat conditions. Gorman understood speed, altitude, pursuit, and fear. What he did not understand, what no one has fully explained since, was what he encountered in the skies near Fargo on the night of October 1st, 1948. That evening began without any hint of history in the making. Gorman had taken off in his P-51 Mustang on a routine flight, intending to log some night flying time before returning to base. The sky was clear. Visibility was excellent. Below him, the lights of Fargo glowed softly against the dark plains. There were no storms, no reported aircraft traffic that would suggest danger or surprise. It was the kind of flight pilots remember as calm, almost peaceful. Then, just before 9 p.m., something caught his eye. Off in the distance, slightly above him, Gorman noticed a single light. At first, it seemed unremarkable, perhaps another aircraft, perhaps a star unusually bright. But within seconds, the light began to move, not drift, not blink. It moved with intention. It accelerated sharply, changed direction without any visible arc, and held a steady brilliance that did not match known aircraft lighting. Gorman watched as the object descended rapidly toward him, stopping abruptly and hovering at an estimated altitude of several thousand feet. He immediately radioed the Fargo Tower to ask if any other aircraft were operating in the area. The answer came back quickly. No military traffic, no civilian planes, no experimental flights. Scheduled *. What happened next would turn a routine training flight into one of the most studied aerial encounters in U.S. Air Force history. Gorman made the decision to approach as he angled his Mustang toward the light. The object reacted instantly. It climbed at a steep angle, far faster than any conventional aircraft of the time, then leveled off as if waiting. Gorman increased speed and altitude, attempting to close the distance. The gap narrowed, then widened, then vanished altogether as the object suddenly reversed direction. This was no balloon. This was no star. And if it was an aircraft, it was unlike anything Gorman or the U.S. military had ever seen. The object appeared as a bright, white orb, roughly 8 to 10 inches in diameter when viewed from the cockpit, with sharply defined edges and no visible structure. It emitted no exhaust, no contrail, no sound, yet it maneuvered with a precision that suggested intelligence, purpose. The two began what can only be described as a dogfight. For nearly 27 minutes. Gorman pursued the object across the night sky. He climbed to over 14,000 feet, pulling hard turns that strained both aircraft and pilot. At one point, the object dove straight toward him at high speed, forcing Gorman to brake sharply to avoid collision. The near miss left him shaken. His heart raced. His hands tightened on the controls. Asterisk, this was not passive observation. This was engagement. Asterisk, on the ground, multiple witnesses watched the encounter unfold. Air traffic controllers at Fargo Tower tracked Gorman's aircraft and observed the unidentified light visually from the airport. Astronomers at a nearby observatory also reported seeing the object perform erratic maneuvers inconsistent with celestial bodies. Radar operators attempted tracking but failed to lock on consistently. Asterisk, as Gorman struggled to keep pace. The object demonstrated acceleration that defied the known limits of aviation. At times, it appeared to hover motionless, only to shoot upward in an instant. Other times, it circled his aircraft as if inspecting it. Gorman later stated that the object seemed aware of his presence, responsive to his movements in a way that felt deliberate. Asterisk, eventually, the strain became too much. Asterisk, low on fuel and physically exhausted, Gorman broke off the chase and returned to base. As he descended, the object followed briefly, then climbed vertically and vanished into the darkness above, accelerating until it was gone. Asterisk, the flight ended. The encounter did not. Asterisk, immediately after landing, Gorman reported the incident. His commanding officers took the account seriously. Medical examinations confirmed he was physically sound, though visibly shaken. There were no signs of hallucination, intoxication, or fatigue-induced error. His flight instruments showed no malfunction. The case was forwarded up the chain of command. Within days, the U.S. Air Force launched an official investigation. Engineers, intelligence officers, and scientists reviewed witness statements, radar logs, weather data, and astronomical charts. Project signed the Air Force's first formal UFO investigation. Program classified the encounter as unidentified. Yet that designation would not last. In 1949, after internal debate, the Air Force released a conclusion stating that Gorman had likely chased a weather balloon illuminated by the planet Venus, asterisk to many. This explanation raised more questions than it answered. Asterisk, Venus does not dive toward aircraft. Weather balloons do not engage in high-speed pursuit, reactive fighter maneuvers, or climb vertically out of sight. Multiple trained observers on the ground had seen the object moving independently of Gorman's aircraft. Astronomers had already ruled out celestial bodies, and the balloon theory required assumptions that contradicted the very data collected by the Pentagon. Even some Air Force personnel privately disagreed with the official conclusion. Years later, internal memos revealed that the Gorman encounter remained a subject of quiet concern within military intelligence circles. It was cited repeatedly in discussions about unidentified aerial phenomena because of one critical factor: credibility. Asterisk, Gorman was not a civilian observer. He was not seeking attention. He did not profit from his account. In fact, the experience troubled him deeply. He maintained his story consistently for the rest of his life, never embellishing, never retracting, and he was not alone. The Gorman encounter occurred during a wave of post-war sightings that would soon culminate in the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident that forced the Air Force to confront the possibility that something unknown was operating in controlled U.S. airspace. Asterisk, what made Gorman's case different was proximity. Asterisk, this was not a distant light on the horizon. This was an object close enough to force evasive maneuvers, close enough to suggest interaction. If it was foreign technology, it surpassed anything known at the time. If it was experimental, no program ever claimed it. And if it was natural, It behaved with intelligence that nature does not display. Asterisk over the decades. Skeptics have offered alternative explanations: misidentified lights, physiological effects, radar errors, psychological stress. Each explanation addresses parts of the encounter. None explain all of it. Asterisk the object's controlled movement, its reaction to pursuit, its acceleration, the multiple independent witnesses, the lack of mechanical signature. Asterisk taken together. The encounter resists simplification. Asterisk today. As the US government openly acknowledges the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena objects that demonstrate advanced capabilities without clear origin, the Gorman encounter takes on new relevance. Declassified Navy videos show objects with similar flight characteristics: sudden acceleration, instantaneous stops, sharp turns without inertia. Asterisk what Gorman described in 1948 sounds uncomfortably familiar, and that raises an unsettling possibility. If something was capable of outperforming a P-51 Mustang over North Dakota in 1948, if it could evade detection, challenge a trained pilot, and disappear at will, then it did not suddenly arrive in the modern era. Asterisk it was already here. Asterisk the question is not whether Lieutenant George Gorman saw something real. The evidence suggests he did. The question is what that something was. On why, after all these years, the answer remains just out of reach. Asterisk perhaps the truth is classified. Perhaps it is unknown. Or perhaps, like the object itself, it appeared briefly, revealed just enough to be undeniable, and then withdrew, leaving us to argue, analyze, and wonder. Asterisk because if the skies over North Dakota were not empty that night in 1948, then they may never have been empty at all. Asterisk and the next time you look up into the darkness, consider this: the most disturbing part of the Gorman encounter is not what followed him through the sky, but what watched him, responded to him, and chose deliberately to leave.